this is the last company that I'm ever going to do, right? Like I'm pretty clear. Like I want to keep growing this till the day I die. Now, we might do more products and we might buy companies at some point and we might do more than staffing and recruitment in 8 years or 10 years or 15 years or whatever. But I'm never going to start something from zero again. I'm never going to sell this.
Cash flow? Cash flow? Did you clear your cash flow?
All right, everybody. I had Sean Malapukar on the episode today. I'm going to give you a quick recap of everything we talked about. You'll definitely want to stick around and hear the entire conversation. We started out talking about how he built his SaaS company totally bootstrapped with his father to 200 employees, and like what all those levers were that as he was growing the company, what levers he hit along the way to go from 10K MRR to 50K MRR to 150 and then eventually to 500K MRR. He talked a lot about, what I was actually most excited to hear about was how he nurtures talent. He takes a really unique approach. I should say it's unique to the SaaS and the tech industry, a really unique approach to how he hires, how he nurtures people inside his company. And also he talked about the concept, this is his lifetime business. So he's not planning to sell it. He's not going to start other companies. He's building this company for his entire life, and he sees that everything he's doing is on a 50 or 60 year time horizon. So he's instead of making bets in years, he's making bets in decades. So definitely stick around for the whole episode. There's a lot of really good stuff in the middle and the end that you're going to want to hear, and I hope you enjoy. Sean Malapukar on the episode here today, founder and CEO of Recruit CRM. Really excited. So you guys are like, I think you've scaled quite a bit since 2017 at like 250 employees. You're in the ATS and recruiting niche for recruiting firms and staffing firms. So super interested to dig into it. We can just to kick it off, maybe we can start just to kind of go over the business a little bit, hear in your words what you guys do. And then I'd love to, kind of dive into some nuances within that.
Yeah, so we're actually just about 200 people. LinkedIn has a funny way of inflating all your numbers up, which is great. But just about 200 people. We started writing code for Recruit CRM right around like the tail end of 2017, and we had our first customer in 2018. But what's funny is our story. So most startups have their own unique stories and so on. But I'm one of the few bootstrapped software entrepreneurs that started their software company with their dad, which is probably less common doing a tech business with your family. So my co-founder is my father, which is a very weird situation. But if you look at it outside of our relationships, we're very complementary. So way back when I was a little child growing up, dad was in the army doing anti-terrorist stuff. Then he got out of the army, went to business school. When he went to business school, I was like a 5-year-old. So I was sort of like, hey, going to business school campus with him and so on back in India. He graduated and he started working for a company called Randstad, which is the world's largest recruiting and staffing company. Dad became CEO of their India business over a period of 6 years, I think. And he continued growing that business. Then ADP came into India and they bought Randstad's payroll processing business, because in India back then, Randstad did everything, not just staffing, but also payroll. And he became CEO of ADP India. ADP is a Fortune 50 company, the world's largest payroll company. And that sort of built our chops on how to run a recruiting business, how to do payroll, and everything in that sort of part of the world. Now, I was a kid at that time. I grew up, I was shipped off to college. So all of the Randstad and ADP time paid my dad really well, and he used that money to pay for my rip-off American college education. So I thank both those companies every day because, I think it's a fortune not to have debt, college debt. So that's a pure privilege, and I only have it because I was born in a privileged situation. So went to college in the Midwest in America, to Indiana University. They have a little business school called the Kelley School of Business. On the Google, the web, US News and like Business Week, the kind of rankings you sort of look at, they ranked all right. So I was like, hey, I got in here. Stanford's not going to take me, so let's go. And so went there, graduated in 2.5 years, moved to Mountain View to work in tech. And, around that time, I was talking with my dad, and he said he wants to start a tech company, but he doesn't know any tech. Uh, I knew enough tech to like just about get started and work with a few developers to like hack something together. And we were like, recruiting and staffing, I know tech, let's do this. And that's how we started it. The total investment we put into this business is well under $100,000 in cash. And today we produce well over that every month in free cash flow, right? So it's been a good 5-6 years.
That's an awesome story. And there's actually a couple of threads that I want to come back to. Yeah. I'll put a pin on a couple of things. One specifically is kind of like scratching your own itch. I love when people build businesses that scratch their own itch, as opposed to like, in the tech world, there's so many tech people that just go in and build companies and niches they know nothing about, just because they think it's a cool niche and there's money there. And, I think the most successful companies are companies that the founders understood a specific market wedge or a pain point and went into a market very intentionally because they understood the market. So that I want to come back to some of that. Also, I saw you had two companies before Recruit CRM. I saw that one, you didn't get product market fit and shut it down. And the second one pivoted into Recruit CRM. So I want to come back to that later.
Correct. So what we did, and this is super important because the first company I did was the one I graduated in 2.5 years. Instead of the standard 4, because I'd started a company with classmates, like a startup in college, and we raised like an angel round for it, like a couple $100,000, which felt like a crazy amount of money way back when you're like 18. And so as a 19-year-old, we raised a couple $100,000. And I and two of my startup co-founders, we gave ourselves fancy titles. I was the CEO, one of them was COO, another one was CTO. It's a complete joke when I think about it. It was the three of us. We graduated. We moved, one of us dropped out. I and my other co-founder were both, two of us were Indian, one of us was from LA, US citizen. So he could drop out. We couldn't really drop out because then we'd get deported. So we had to graduate to self-sponsor our visas, right? So we graduated and we moved to San Francisco, to Silicon Valley to work in tech. That startup didn't work out. And sort of around the time where we were trucking along on it and figuring out what to do, that was when I was already having conversations with my dad about doing something together. So when we came back to India, our first product was basically, when we started working with those 2 or 3 developers, we started working on something called My Stuff. And the idea behind My Stuff was we wanted to build software so that large companies, like large logistics companies and delivery companies, especially in India, like we have a Flipkart in India, which is like India's Amazon, and like our version of DoorDash, which is like Swiggy and so on. They need to hire tens of thousands of bike delivery drivers every month, and we would build staffing software for them. So we wanted to start by building staffing software for mass recruitment. And 6 months into that, we sort of realized, hey, this is not working out. We should just build what we know, which is staffing software for staffing firms, because we understand recruitment and staffing firms a lot better than 50,000 person corporations that needed to recruit thousands of drivers every month for themselves. And so that's how we pivoted, and it just made so much more sense because Recruit CRM was a much more natural fit into what we understood versus just trying to go out there because we thought there was an opportunity.
So you did My Staff for what, like 10 months or something is what your LinkedIn says?
Yes, it's probably even less than that. So sometime to it's the same team, just so you know. So it's the same company, it's the same C Corp. It's the same, or in India, it was private limited company back then we flipped into a C Corp. But it was the same team, same engineers, same everything, just different domain and different like use case. But it's basically one company, right? Recruit CRM and My Staff.
I want to take a quick break from the episode and say, if you're enjoying this content, the best way you can say thank you is to subscribe. So if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, hit the subscribe button there as well. And also share it out to your friends and colleagues. If you find this content useful and you think other people will enjoy it as well, please send it out. And back to the episode. Cool. Well, let's dig into that. So, So you started out trying to build software to help these like logistics delivery companies hire at scale.
Yeah.
And like, what did what was like step one? Did you build anything? Did you just try to sell a
Yeah,
vision?
yeah.
And
So the stupid thing we did was we tried to build the basics of what we thought would make sense. And then because of my dad's experience at Randstad, a lot of the folks that worked with him or technically worked for him in his teams were now, you know, global heads of talent and like country managers for HR and talent for these companies. So we actually literally the companies I named, we went to them and we got meetings with them like one phone call. And then when we met them, they said, "Oh, this is great, blah, blah, blah." But then when we said, "Hey, would you buy this and how much would you buy it for?" They're like, "We have to think about it." So it wasn't so even though we had like crazy business connect, like in terms of like getting a meeting, we didn't have the ability to close because they didn't want a solution that did that because we hadn't really done market research to figure that out. It was more like, dad was like, "Hey, this is an opportunity. We should do this together." And we started working on it with like two developers back then.
so how were they doing it before? Like, with just manually, like spreadsheets, or how were they doing
Yeah,
just hiring?
they did it manually because in India it's a very low value recruitment, right? So the average delivery driver in India makes like $200 a month post all fees, right? Like literally and these are delivery bike riders delivering packages. So they make maybe 300, $350, right? That sort of range, net pay, because like a lot of money goes into like the mortgage on their bike and their fuel and gas costs and so on. So once you deduct all of that, these folks make $200 to $250 and their turnover is like 90 days. So most of them quit within 90 days of being hired because it's such a shitty job, right? Because you're doing like 30 packages, you're barely getting paid. You're getting like $1 a package or like 50 cents a package or something. And thus these companies were hiring like 7, 8, 10,000 delivery drivers each per month because there's so many people in India and so many packages to be shipped and so on. But because these people only lasted 3 months on an average and they were relatively low value hires, the recruitment fee on hiring someone like this is basically $20. So the
Wow.
kind of recruiters that would recruit these people were people that would literally, for the lack of a better word, go into some version of a slum and be like, "Hey, XYZ company is hiring 100 logistic drivers. Who wants to come? And if you want to come, show up at this place at this time tomorrow," and then you'd have 100 bike riders show up, right? And it's like mass recruitment. You're not necessarily like no one has a resume. Everyone's just showing up, and you're with their ID cards or whatever just to make sure they're a legit person. But so they were like, "Hey, we don't need software to do this. It's like a very low value." The problem is the tech solved the problem, but it was so low value for them, it wasn't worth investing software, tech, solutions, so on and so forth.
So what was it, like an outreach tool to reach that community of people that would
Yeah,
accept a job like that?
Yeah, it was basically a tool for hiring managers in each location because most of these companies have fulfillment centers across the country to be able to say, "Hey, I need X number of people in my fulfillment center this week, this month, this quarter." And then that being routed to the hiring agencies they worked with. So it was still working with staffing firms, but we were trying to sell to the company who would then give it to these, for the lack of a better word, bottom of the pyramid staffing firms, where the recruiter themselves is not super skilled. These are people that are just going out, probably didn't go to high school, but they're able to go into a place and get 100 bike riders. And so it was going to give them the tools to be able to go in and register those people with their ID cards and so on. So you didn't have people that had worked for you 2 years ago come back and try to work for you again and try to get some of your freebies or joining bonuses and so on.
I got you. Okay.
The same people. It's like a trial. There's someone who comes in, signs up with you. 60 days later, they quit. A month later, they sign up again, and the first month you get like an extra bonus or whatever, right?
But the companies didn't really care. Like, it wasn't worth solving that problem. Like, if the same person gets the bonus 3 times, who cares?
That market, because that was sort of the year where each of these companies in India had raised over $1 billion each. Raised $1 billion, not $1 billion valuation, right? They were just burning through money like crazy. So it was just about getting shit done, and they didn't really care about implementing software and tools for this use case. They cared about implementing software and tools for hiring their vice presidents and their more sophisticated talent that costs $100,000 or $200,000 a year. So India is a very steep job market in the sense that we have people that make $500,000 a year, right? In salary, not business owners. I'm talking about working professionals, right? At top companies, top CXO types who make three, four, five, six, $700,000 a year. Some make $1 million a year. But we have a shit ton of people at the bottom of the pyramid making $100 a month, which is why the per capita income, if I'm not wrong, is something like $3,500.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Or $2,000, but then there's working population and non-working population and so on. But yeah, it's low single digit thousands of dollars, right? Because the population pyramid is steep. So anything that's an unskilled work, where the person just needs to know how to ride a motorbike, which is the base mode of transportation, everyone knows how to do it. So you can get that talent very easily. So you don't need tools to optimize that. Versus if you're looking for a VP of engineering who knows like a certain stack, now that talent costs a lot, like exponentially more. Versus in America, the difference isn't that much. Like if you hire like an Uber delivery driver, does not make 1% of what a VP of engineering makes, right? Or a VP of engineering in the US doesn't make 100 times what a delivery
Yeah, it might be
driver.
like 10 or 20%, maybe 10%, I would guess, but it's an order of magnitude at least difference.
Yeah. So if the differential here is the delivery driver makes 30 grand a year and the VP of engineering makes 300 grand a year. In India, the delivery driver makes $2,000 a year and the VP of engineering makes like 100 grand a year or 150 grand a year, or like, something that's like 40, 50, 60, 70 times more, right? Because skilled talent is harder to find, but like unskilled talent, like, or, workforce, crazy amounts.
Interesting. So what was the moment in my staff, like when you guys said, all right, forget this delivery driver thing, we're building a recruiting CRM? Like what was the moment that you had that realization?
So like after one of the meetings we had with one of these companies, and I don't want to take names, but they basically told us that, hey, why would we even want to spend money to do this? Because like we don't even put this on Excel right now. We literally just have these recruitment drives and 1,000 people show up and we just take 200 and then we only enter the people in our system that are selected, and then they go into our whatever, delivery onboarding app, right? Sort of like what DoorDash would have or whatever. But they don't really go through a strict selection process because it's just not worth the cost.
Interesting. So I'm picturing you guys like walking out of the meeting with whatever big company, and
yeah, you're just getting out of that room and you're like, hey, they like what we spent like the last 6 or 7 months building was like completely useless because the tech would work, but like they just don't care, right? It's just so irrelevant. And then the second problem is this, right? So you're a large company. This logistics piece is like one of the important things you do. But within your talent acquisition team, the fancy senior talent acquisition people are working on the fancy roles because they want to hire your next head of engineering or head of sales or head of, operations or whatever. And it's your junior, less important, quote unquote, and probably even less sophisticated, less educated, less paid recruiters that are responsible for this dirty part of your business. So even if these people want to buy your software, they really can't, because management doesn't care, because their boss, who's the head of talent, doesn't care as much. And even if he cared, he needed to get approved from the head of HR, who would then need to get approved from the CFO to buy this. And this wasn't a big enough problem for them to like push that through.
So what was that conversation like about the pivot to recruit CRM? What was that conversation like for you guys?
Yeah, so it was as we were in the car with me and my dad. We were driving back from Mumbai to Pune, Pune is where we live. Mumbai is where the city's at. And it was like a 2-hour drive. And like sometime during that conversation, like at some point we were like, hey, we need to like to not do this. And then I think in the beginning, Dad was like, hey, like what? So we just scrap all of this code and like, screens and database and everything that has been built over the last 6 months. And I was like, I don't think we'll ever get back to it, but we won't delete it. We'll just keep it on the side and maybe we'll use it one day, and we still have never used it and we're doing millions of dollars in revenue. Right. But that was like an internal conversation around doing that. And I was like, hey, the story makes a lot more sense, right? You ran a staffing and recruiting company. Let us build tech for staffing and recruiting companies. Because there we have some insight into what's useful, what's not useful. Here we have no clue because we've never run logistics type businesses at scale.
Interesting. So you made the decision to pivot, and then like what was step one? Like what did you do the next day after that decision?
Yeah, I made a web page because this time I didn't want to start writing code before like someone said that they wanted this. So I created a little web page, one single screen, which basically said Recruit CRM all in one software. I think we put in a price that is like 1/5 of what we charge today. Like we tried to see how much all the other tools in this category cost, and we were like, let's charge way less, or at least in the beginning, just to now that's not the case anymore, as you know the product has become more premium and become highly rated. But in the beginning, it was like, hey, let's see if someone will buy this thing for like $30 a month or something, right? And we put in a web page and we said we're making something like this is going to be awesome. Put in your email if you're interested. And we did some basic SEO. I wrote a blog post about it, and we had 30 people put in their emails onto that web page. Very basic SEO, but like did SEO for like recruiting agency software, which is like a very specific keyword, barely has any searches, right? But like, we wanted it to be as specific as possible. And I was like, this is awesome. 30 people want to try out what we have. And when we checked, we realized they were from different countries. And we were like, hey, we can build like a global company this way. And then,
Was it mostly like North America, or was it Europe, or like where?
Europe and North America, and a little bit of Asia, but mostly Europe and North America. And our first customer was someone in the UK, our different countries, which is insane. Like literally blew my mind. Like 10 actual customers once we actually went live 10 months later.
Wow, that's awesome. So, all right. So you put up the landing page and you get these 30 customers. How from the day you put up,
we get 30 people who say that they will sign up to us if we have a product. We don't have anything back then. We have one line.
30 leads, right? 30 prospects. So from the time you put up the landing page to like getting the 30, how long did that take? And then was SEO the only thing you used to drive the traffic?
Yeah. That's it. SEO. No money. We spend no money. We spend no money at all on advertising till we got to like 10 grand in monthly recurring revenue, and that was way later. So it took us like 6 months to build something that people could actually log into and use, because we weren't the best programmers or developers, and then we made it a free beta so people could try it out. I think of the original 30, only like 3 actually set up the trial. So they gave us a lot of confidence, but no cash. And then they used it for free for 3 months. And then the awesome part was when, I think a month and a half into the beta, this one person in the Netherlands reached out to us. And he was an intern at this new recruiting company that had like 2 people. And he said, hey, how do I buy it? And we were like, let's set up Stripe because there was no way to give us money at that point. So next week and a half, we set up like this. We created a subscription Stripe, created like a plan so they could go in and swipe their card. And I think I had like a mental like orgasm, for the lack of a better word, when I saw. I was like, damn, this is the best thing in the world, right? This is like because think, right, from the time I started like being an entrepreneur in college, raised angel money, did like a consumer startup. This was the first time someone truly like bet on us and gave us money.
Yeah,
what we had,
it's really
the code we had written. Because the first startup I did was like a marketplace, so you'd buy goods from each other. So it didn't quite. They weren't buying tech. They were just like, hey, used college textbook, and you made like a 1% commission on it. So it was like you sell $100 book, you make $1. So it's a horrible idea, which is probably why it died, right? But this was the first time someone was like, hey, here's $2,000, right, for your software, for the code your team has written.
I mean, there's literally, for me, there's no better feeling than just like coming up with an idea and then building it and then putting it out into the world and like getting people to say, this is awesome, I want to pay for this, like I need this. There's no better feeling than that.
It was awesome. I'm telling you, that felt way better than like the 100K deals we close now, right? Because we close 100K deals, right? We go out and we do like 4 or 5 demos, whatever, and someone fires us $100,000 or 120 grand. And it doesn't feel as good as it still feels good, but it does that was just like next level, right? Like that was like achieving like, sainthood or something. Like it felt awesome.
I mean,
And
you had two right before that. You had two missed product market fit businesses, and then
yeah,
so this is the third shot on goal. And like I think a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs give up after the first and sometimes second failure. And like getting that win, like that's the more shots on goal you get, the more goals
but
you're gonna get.
this is the last company that I'm ever going to do, right? Like I'm pretty clear. Like I want to keep growing this till the day I die. Now, we might do more products and we might buy companies at some point and we might do more than staffing and recruitment in 8 years or 10 years or 15 years or whatever. But I'm never going to start something from zero again. I'm never going to sell this.
Wow,
And
I mean, in the tech world, that's a bold statement. I mean, there's a lot of
yeah,
tech people that
30 minutes before this demo or 10 minutes before this demo, this meeting podcast started, I got an email from the second largest company in our segment that reached out and asked if we'd be interested in talking to their, I think their managing director, CEO, about considering being part of the basically an M&A pitch, right? And we've had essentially all of our top three competitors reach out to us, and the private equity funds that own them reach out to us at different times across the last 2 or 3 years, offering conversations, and the answer's the same: we're never selling.
do you ever take the meetings just to get like competitive intel or try to like learn about the process?
We took one with one of our larger competitor with Bullhorn, just to have fun with them, and then we record all meetings, which we shared with the person we were talking to because they have to click on yes, this meeting will be recorded, and then I just sent it to everyone in my team just to have fun with what we talked about. Because we basically said thank you for all the customers you're giving us. Our largest customers are people that move to us from Bullhorn.
That's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah, if their customer success team hadn't failed those customers, I wouldn't have those extra millions of dollars of revenue.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's a great story. So, all right. So back to Recruit CRM. So, you made the pivot. You got, you put out the landing page. You got those 30 signups. You built the product. You had the Netherlands customer pay for it, and then you're off to the races. So, like, what was like this journey from that day that you built that Stripe integration to where you're at now? Like, what did that journey look like?
Yeah, so there's probably phases, right? Like, so in the beginning, we were just you just do everything. You're the product manager, you're the salesperson, you're the customer success manager, you're the engineer, and the privilege of being in India is like you can start with lower cost talent, but also like in the beginning, lower cost talent also means no experienced talent, people that have just graduated from college, people that have never like written code before, people that have never done anything before across all of your functions. And when you're bootstrapped, you sort of have to like work with that talent. And a lot of that talent that we had back then is still with us, and they have truly grown. And some of them have gotten promoted multiple times and upskilled and learned, and like also make 10, 15, 20 times what they started making, what they started at, right? So the first 10 months were literally getting from $0 in revenue to 100K in revenue.
Total or per month or?
No. That was total. So 10K a month, basically. It took us 10 or 11 months to get to 10K a month. It took us another 10 or 11 months to get to 50K a month. And then it took us another just about a year to get to 150K a month.
Wow.
And then
so that's exponential growth. Like you're seeing the curve is.
So 10K, 50K, monthly revenue, right? I'm talking monthly recurring revenue. 10, 50, 150, 300 something, 500 something, so on, right? Like per month. So just boop, boop, boop. And
so the growth chart like that is curved. It's like exponential growth. You're growing faster than a linear growth chart.
Yeah, of course. Faster than linear growth. Though obviously, like, let's say the first year we grew 500%, we're not growing 500% anymore, right? We're growing between like just under 100%, but like it's still fast growth, and we've never raised $1 of venture capital or debt, and we produce free cash flows every.
Congrats, man! That's really that's unique. A lot of SaaS companies that get to your size don't get there bootstrapped.
Yeah, we are net income positive. We are free cash flow positive. We are positive in every financial metric that you can think of, right? Like we produce profits / cash and cash and across all metrics. GAAP, non-GAAP, EBITDA, like whatever way you want to measure cash, we make cash, right? Uh, and we make a bunch of it, right? So it's not like 5% profit, right? This is like 30+%.
It's awesome. So the going back to those kind of like growth milestones. So you talked about like the 10K MRR moment, the 50K MRR moment, then you said like 150, then 500. Like what were the levers that you saw at each stage?
So and another crazy thing happened right around COVID. My dad stopped doing what he was doing, which was mostly like a training and education business. And he basically completely put his focus on this with me. So before he was more like a mentor, like co-founder, but mostly spending a day a week with us. When COVID hit and we were like 500,000 at that point in ARR almost, he completely moved to this, and that helped us really scale because he had run companies at scale. So before that moment, it was basically me doing everything, plus me being a manager of like a bunch of people. The big thing he did between the time we went from like 50K a month to 150K a month was we hired a lot of our directors, not all of them. And so these are basically people that ran our teams. And that helped us over the last, because when COVID happened, we were 25 people, now we're 200+ people. And that's 3 years, right? Or 3.5 years. And to go from being an individual contributor to a manager is a shift, because you have to like be cool delegating. But the key thing is, how do you go from manager to manager of managers? So you're not telling someone to get the job done. You're telling someone what KPIs they need to do, and then they get the job done through a bunch of other people. And the moment you can get to that stage, the leverage increases exponentially, because the moment you're a manager of managers, you can have multiple, you can add as many layers as you want, as long as you've set up the company the right way, as long as you've set up incentives, KPIs, and you have people aligned, not just on long-term stuff like stock options, but more like, how do you track variable pay? How are people disincentivized to do things that are not good? So you start thinking more about like people strategy, and like what are like drivers, and like, what incentives or disincentives you want to set up. But if you set it right, then you can scale, because it's gotten easier, right? So with 200 people, the company is a lot easier to manage today than at 30 or 40 people. And I'm fairly certain.
It's an interesting paradox. Like I've even with my company, I've seen the same thing. Like the bigger it gets, the easier it is to manage. It's an interesting paradox as an entrepreneur.
Like a 12-person company is far harder to manage than a 1,200-person company. People don't get that, right? Because guess what? A CEO of a 1,200-person company is a lot less stressed out. Unless they made stupid decisions and like over leveraged their business or raised money at a crazy valuation, and then they're stressed out for other reasons. But like, if it's a profitable, decent, good business, a 12-person business is far more stressful than like a 200-person business and a 1,000-person business and so on. Because to truly do success the right way, you set up systems and processes so you don't have single points of failure.
Yep, absolutely. And what was your bottleneck? Was it building product? Was it, sales? Was it marketing? Like what's the lever or like the bottleneck that slows growth for you?
Talent. So basically having the right talent do the right things at the right time. So for example, we should have probably gone multilingual sooner. We should have started charging in like 15 different currencies sooner. We should have probably started having people in different countries sooner. This is our first year where we have people that speak Portuguese and French and so on and so forth, right? To serve different.
And there's salespeople selling in those markets, or their customer success, or
both.
Okay.
Both customer success and sales. Different people, but both roles, right?
But you don't need that for the engineering team. You can keep the engineering team in one locale.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. The engineering team can be wherever you want, but your go-to-market team, all the way from the content and the blog posts you're creating to the ads you're doing, to like the rep that's doing the sales demo, to like the person who does onboarding and account management, to the person that does chat support. Those people need to be available in the language that your customer needs you to be in, or your customers need to be in. And that's just one example, right? Another example is like, we should have just started advertising a lot sooner and started spending money, because like we took a year to get to 10 grand a month, or like just under a year, because like we spent zero money on ads, zero. And so every single person we got through like the shitty like SEO I had done, and then another person we just graduated, great guy, but he just graduated from college back then, and like whatever he could figure out, right? And so we were like, hey, now it's now we're doing 10 grand a month. It's taken forever. Let's do ads, and we've spent like maybe 10 or 20 grand a month in ads back then, and in 12 months we were 5x. And if we hadn't done that, we'd probably not go from 10 to 50 and 50 to 150. We'd probably go from 10 to 25, and then we'd probably been a lot slower, right? And even and then there's some situations where you go overboard, right? You try to spend too much money, and then you realize, hey, like advertising is diminishing returns. It's not like you spend 5x and you get 5x the leads. But there's some things you just learn as you do them and as you test those thresholds. Same thing with talent, right? Like our big struggle was we were really good at getting people, making sure they're trained and deploying them, but we didn't have any managers because we hired all of these fresh college graduates. So we had to hire managers from outside, and then we had to do a lot of training for existing folks to turn some of the more experienced people over 3, 4, 5 years into managers, which we're still sort of doing, right? We still have people that have become managers that started their careers here essentially. And now
that's so awesome. Yeah. I love that aspect of your story of, kind of like taking these really junior level people at the start of their career and,
not junior, fresh. Like they've never, this is their first job. By like for about 75 to 80% of our team, this is their first job ever. First real adult job across all functions.
Yeah, I love that story. That's you basically built the people you needed for your company. Like they grew as your company grew, your team and your talent grew to be what your company needed.
Yeah. Now this is very counterintuitive, and people take offense at this. But like, managerial talent is different, right? So once someone becomes an executive and they're managing teams and missions and so on, and you're running a team of 5, 10, 12, 15 people, it's different, and you need maturity and skills to like get there. But I believe if I hire a fresh graduate and I train them for a year to become a salesperson or a customer success manager or a software individual contributor software engineer, they will be more productive at the end of that year than someone I hire from the market, probably at like a 30, 40, 50% premium, who has 5 or 6 years of work ex, who's still an individual contributor, who's now going to spend a quarter to learn how we do stuff, which is fine. But post that quarter, they will still be less productive or equally productive and not more productive
than the person that, so you're saying after the first year, like you need a full year to kind of get that fresh person up to speed, but the fresh person will be more productive after a year, you're saying?
So the first person will be more productive after a year than what a lateral hire is after 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, interesting. So it's really investing.
But it's not. Right. So what we do is we hire college graduates on internships 6 months before they graduate from college, and they start working with us part-time, those 6 months of college. And then by the time they graduate, 6 more months, they're awesome. And sometimes by the time they graduate, they're already awesome. And college graduates, if I put out a job post, I can recruit a bunch of college graduates in about 2, 3, 4 weeks, right? Because we have a full-blown HR team that just handles this. We deal with it pretty well.
But how do they get, like, there's a lot of experience that, in a software developer role, there's a lot of just general experience that comes with time.
The first 6 months are just training. We just teach them stuff. We pay them to learn stuff. They don't write any production code. So we have people that have interned with us for 6 months, no production code, just training. How do we do this? What framework do we use? Why do we use it that way? Because we hire a bunch of them, right? So 2 weeks ago, we hired 50 fresh college graduates in engineering. That's just.
Do you keep them focused on like a specific module or component of the application, or do you show them like the entire ecosystem?
The entire thing. And then they get deployed on a specific module, on a squad or team that works on a specific module, but they learn about like all the tech we use.
The whole thing, yeah. And now, is it like, are they full stack? Are they getting into DevOps and infrastructure?
No. And then they start specializing. So by the time they finish the internship and they graduate from college, they're assigned to like DevOps team or front end team or back end team or like communication software, like that part of our software, so on.
Okay. And are you guys all co-located in one office, or do you work remote?
No, all remote. All remote. We are in the 200 people are in like 80 or 90 separate locations.
Wow. And then how do they like pair with like these interns? Do they pair with somebody as they're
Yes,
getting ramped up?
there's a manager who's responsible for your training, but then you also get a mentor who has been through the same program a year before, and like every 3 or 4 kids get a mentor, so that the mentors tend to be the top 20% of last year's cohort, largely.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a cool model. I really like that. And that you're
It
saying that
works.
that's been like that model that you're saying like
Yeah.
people take offense to that for some reason.
No. People take offense that when I say that someone fresh out of college a year in is as good as like someone who spent 8 years working somewhere and is an individual contributor.
Yeah, I mean my
Like
gut.
if they are the person who's an individual contributor at who's 30 years old, they take offense. When I
Yeah,
say
the
it.
individual contributor takes offense. Yeah, I my gut on that tells me that it might be more the exception to the rule, but I think you have to be like really, really good at picking the shooting stars early. Like
Yeah.
you're
So
kind
we
of betting on
got
the person.
no. So we had 50 people join us 2 weeks ago. We had 76,000 applications.
So you're very selective, basically is what I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
saying.
This is like a higher selective. What was that? Less than 0.1%.
Yeah. So how like what's the quality? So to find those 50 like shooting stars that are capable of getting up to speed in 1 year and performing better than someone with 5 years of experience after 1 year, what's the
Yeah,
quality that you look for in those people?
we test them. So we first give them a technical test. They pass the technical test. Then once they pass the technical test, we give them like a take-home project. So they have to like spend hours writing code. If they don't want to, great, good for them. But like we need them to do that. So they need to spend 5, 6, 7 hours, however long it takes them to come up with logic or a solution. Then they submit that code. We check it for plagiarism. If it's legit, we then do an HR interview with them. The HR team does a behavioral interview because we've mapped what our top engineering talent looks like in terms of personality traits. Now that's now that part is a trade secret, but like so we do BEIs, behavioral interviews, and then we figure out if they are like one of the 10, 12, 15 profiles we have for what an engineer needs to be like, what their quirks are, so on. If they fit that mold, we send them to an engineering group interview. Then if they're okay in the group interview, they do another interview with the head of engineering. If they're okay with that, then they do an interview with one of the founders. For engineering, it's normally my dad. For at this point, for product managers, sales, customer success, it's me. So we run different functions at this point where we do like a fit interview, and then they become an intern.
So
And then
there's like that, like the way you just described that, it was very like process, like this is step one, this is step two, this is step three. But there's got to be like something in there that's like, there's got to, maybe it's the people that you have doing this, but there's got to be like something in that flow that's like exceptional and special. Because I do think that what you're saying, like hiring 50 fresh people out of college and turning them all into like 10x engineers.
But we don't turn all of them into 10x engineers. Out of those 50 people, we end up retaining like 30, 32 at the end of the internship.
That's still damn good, man. Over half. Like that's really
Yeah, well
something
over
like
half.
there's something exceptional in your selection process, I think, that that makes it like really special.
But see, most other companies cannot do this because it's too much of a time investment. Like it's just too much time. Like this stuff takes like the first year we did this, we literally spent over 50% of every single person's time in the company doing either hiring or training kids. Because like kids need a lot of attention. And you can only do this if like I'm going to run this company till I die, right? So I'm looking at this from like a 50-year horizon, right? I'm about to be 30. I can do this till I'm like 78, 80, whatever. So if you have like a 3-year horizon or a 5-year horizon, this is a waste of time, right? You should just raise a bunch of money, hire a bunch of experienced people, and do your job. But if you're not thinking about your business in years, but in decades, this works because you have batch after batch, and it gets easier over time. But it's really painful to do, right? So for example, if you're a venture-backed company, the chances of this working 0%. If you're a private equity-backed company, 0%. There's no patience, right? The capital doesn't have patience. Your capital needs to have like crazy patience to be able to like make the math work.
But that's what I was saying. It's kind of like investing, like what you're doing with people, you're investing in people.
Yeah. Guess what? The crazy thing is like these kids aren't even productive after 1 year. Most of them like truly productive, right? Truly killing it. Most of them truly kill it their second, third, fourth year. and then some of them quit, some of them go to masters for college and so on. Like, they go from India to America or whatever. So you have all of that happen. But the thing is, we're betting that the few we can keep will be worth like the everyone else that we're not able to keep.
Yeah, you might keep like 10 or 15 of those like truly rock
over
stars.
years, over multiple years, over 3, 4,
Yeah.
5 years. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And they'll
Yeah,
end
it's
up
really
becoming.
interesting. It's a really interesting approach. I mean, that's like in the US, there's a lot of companies that do that, but they're more like the big consulting firms like Accenture or Deloitte, like that.
This
That's
is
their model.
this is exactly what a Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley does with their analyst program. You grill the shit out of people. A small percentage of them stay, become associates. A small percentage of them stay, become VPs, executive directors, whatever, then become senior VPs, then become MDs. Same model. It's just that most tech companies don't have the patience to do this because it takes forever and it requires you to invest a lot of capital into your people operations slash HR function, and then also spend essentially 50% of all your non-fresh graduates time into training fresh graduates, which most companies aren't willing to do because that basically means for the next year, all of the sprints you're doing, you're going to be only able to do half the stuff because like the other half is going training people. But then in a year, you have way more productive talent than you did this year. But then you can double down and invest again and hire a bunch more people. And then you can do it again and again and again. And at some point, you have a crazy amount of like talent dividends.
It's like it's compounding. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I love it. I
yeah,
love what you're doing.
yeah, and the crazy thing is these kids we hire aren't as useful at another company. They're good. They'll still be good engineers. But like the thing is, you've gone through because you've done a year and a half of training for our platform, our tech stack, our way of like our naming conventions, our like our infotainment. Like this is super tailored talent, which is why we're able to make it work. So this person is better than an 8-year work-ex IC at my company. Now, if this person had to go to another company and compete with another 8-year individual contributor, they'd be worse. But I don't care, right? I care about what they're like for my company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now they'd be just as good as that 8-year IC after another 8 years. Like, so that's fine. But the thing is, that extra advantage is something that I get because we've spent time nurturing them for our process.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. So let's change gears. I love everything about that. That's such a cool spin. Like you're right. I don't think a lot of tech companies do that talent nurture model. So I love that you're doing it.
It doesn't work for most companies, right? It's statistically like if you need to do an IPO in 24 months, it doesn't work. If you need to raise a round in 12 months, it doesn't work. If you need to sell your company, it doesn't work. If you have a board that asks you why you aren't making certain progress every quarter, it doesn't work, right? It works when you can be a basic dictatorship at your company and say, hey, I'm going to do this over the next 10 years, suck it up.
Yeah, it's like that's kind of like it's a good segue. I was going to ask you about KPIs because a lot of these SaaS companies that are venture backed are tracking things like top line, quarter over quarter or year over year growth. They're looking at CAC. They're looking at capital efficiency in the business. Net dollar retention, that kind of stuff. Like these types of.
You look at all of the same most of the same metrics. It's just that for us, cash flow is an important metric. Right, because we're bootstrapped, so we basically our bank balance has been built up by our own cash flow. So our core metric is that every month the bank balance needs to go up. Like it's a very simple formula.
EBITDA.
Right? Every month, yeah, but not even EBITDA, cash flow, because EBITDA can still be fake, right? Because you can have depreciation and stuff. Like actual core raw cash, you need to have more money in your bank. Like the number in your bank account when you refresh the app on the first of every month needs to be more than it was the first of last month. Like that's the most core KPI we have, which it is. Like our bank balance has gone up every single month since we've been in existence, right? Almost. And so that's one thing. So that's our core metric, and everything else we still track. We still track year-over-year growth rate. We still track payback period. We don't really care about lifetime value because that's an irrelevant metric. But we care about how long it takes us to get back cash that we spend to acquire a customer. CAC is important.
What's your payback period typically? Like what do you think is a good target for that metric?
It depends on what, like every company can have their own targets. We like to keep it at 6 months.
Okay. Yeah, that's like I think a pretty average one. I was curious if you were going to say much lower than that, or
No, 6 months.
I saw a metric recently that Salesforce J curve is another way of saying payback period. Their J curve is
Years
like 4 years or something.
something crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy.
But that's only recent. Like last year, it was that high. But normally, Salesforce, I believe, is like an 18 to 24-month payback period.
It's
But they're
still
also
high.
doing, yeah, but they're only doing enterprise deals. So it works out because if almost all of your customers are 100K or more, and they on an average stay with you for like 10 years, then like it's fine. Not ideal, but like if you have Salesforce's balance sheet, you can fund it, and,
Yeah,
and
sure.
the math works out. But like, if you don't have you don't have billions of dollars on your balance sheet, and you don't do 30 billion in recurring revenue that you can count down for next year, you probably can't go as crazy
Yeah,
on
it's
sales.
interesting. So you're saying like you're tracking J curve payback period, you're tracking cash flow, you're tracking year-over-year growth, and was there any other key metrics that you really pay attention to?
Net dollar retention.
Net dollar retention.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah,
At
cool.
least
And
100%, right? Like that's a very ours is well over 100%, but like the concept is this: if we stop selling, we need to be growing at least marginally every year, even if we stop signing up new customers, because that means that we don't have a leaky bucket. So net of churn, our expansions need to still grow our base. And as long as you're there, I think as a SaaS company, you're in good shape.
so and that's a good timely topic to bring up, because I think a lot of SaaS companies have been experiencing over the last 12 to 18 months the leaky bucket case,
Yeah.
for a couple of reasons. One, the money supply is dried up, but so that affects venture backed companies, not so much a problem for you, but the other problem is like churn and seat churn.
It's a problem for our customers, though, because our customers are recruitment agencies, and a lot of them recruit for venture-backed companies that haven't
Yeah.
been recruited anymore for the last 12 months. And thus they get impacted way more in a bad market.
So that's the churn and seat churn. Like the churn is like customers just going out of
Contraction.
business, or
Yeah, so we've had a lot less expansion and a lot more seat contraction on a lot of our customers. So let's say in a normal year, we'd be 120% net dollar retention. Now we're just barely a few percentage points over 100, which is a huge difference, right? Because before, if we would grow like 20% a year without selling to anybody, now we'll grow like 3% a year or 4% a year without selling to anybody, which is a massive difference, right? But we're still fine mathematically.
yeah. Can you, for the listeners, can you explain net dollar retention? I think a lot of them probably know it, but can you explain how
Yeah,
like the formula for that?
Yeah, sure. So there's like a simple way to think about it is there's three things you need to care about. There's what we call gross customer retention, gross dollar retention, net dollar retention, right? NDR. Gross customer retention is what percentage of the customers you had last year or last month or whatever way you want to do it, month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter, that you still have today. So let's say you have 100 customers paying you $2 each. Now, let's say 10 of them have canceled. You have $180. So you have 90% net customer retention, or you have 10% net customer churn, right? Or gross customer churn. Then you have gross dollar retention or gross dollar churn. Now, these are both like, the question is, are you counting how much it's subtracted or how much is left? But basically, not all your customers pay you the same amount of money. So this metric is a little higher value because it helps you track what percentage of your revenue from last year you maintained. Because you might have had 100 customers last year, but one of them paid you $50. So the question is, did that person churn or not? Because if they churn, you're down 50+%. If they're not, then you're probably not as down. So that's again in a percentage. You could, for example, lose 30% of your customers, but only lose 15% of your revenue because only the small ones churned. Or if you're in a terrible situation, it could be the other way around. Now, net dollar retention is the most important number out of these three. net dollar retention can be more than 100, and it can be more than 100 because it adds back revenue for customers that have spent more with you this year. Customers can spend more with you by buying more seats, by upgrading to a more expensive tier or edition, by buying additional add-ons from you, technically through a price increase as well, though that's frowned upon and you can't technically just keep doing price increases every year. And so those are three ways you can add it back. So for example, let's say I had 100 customers, they were paying me $1 each. 20 of them canceled, so I have $80 left. But those 80 customers this year are spending 50% more. They're spending $1.50 each on an average because they bought a bunch of add-ons, bought more seats, upgraded to a more expensive edition. Now they're spending $120. So in that case, gross revenue churn is 20%, but net revenue retention is 120% because it's actually gone up. Did that help?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you. So that's like, I think a lot of SaaS companies, I think, are moving to that as a core metric. I think it's, there's been a lot of focus on like year over year growth, and there's been a lot of focus on CAC and stuff like that. But I think, in EBITDA, we talked about like cash flows and EBITDA, a lot of those metrics can be gamed. So I think the net dollar retention is definitely more of a focus these days.
For pure non-infrastructure software companies that don't really run data centers and stuff, EBITDA is an irrelevant metric because you have nothing to depreciate. You're not buying, like maybe outside of your office, which shouldn't be that big an expense as a percentage of revenue for a SaaS business. You don't really, it's not like you're setting up a new factory that you need to depreciate every year, right? The only thing we depreciate as a company is laptops, right? Like MacBooks that everyone gets. So that's like a very small number. So like earnings before tax and depreciation is like, I feel like not as relevant for a software business. For a software business, you should just be looking at free cash flow, net income. That's it.
I mean, there's some cases like amortization of expenses or revenue and like recognition and stuff like that. So there's some cases where like that can make sense. So you can like smooth out your metrics over, because like you might have ARR, like people might pay less to get like a yearly fee. So like maybe they'll pay you once yearly to get like a discount. So, but then like maybe you have lumpy months, so you want to amortize that, and then that affects like your profit reporting.
It would still be covered in net income though. So if you're doing annual net income, and if someone's paid you up in cash flow, it would still show up, because in cash flow, what would basically show up is how much cash you've collected versus how much you've paid out. So you're sorted on cash flow. And obviously the cash flow is not amortized. It is just how much you've collected and how much you've paid. So nothing's amortized or depreciated. And in net income, you're just counting the amount of revenue you've realized anyway. So if someone gives you like an annual subscription in December and you count 93% of it next year, it counts in next year's net income. So as long as your net income and cash flow are both positive, you're probably in good shape. If one of them are negative, you need to have another look at what your numbers are, unless you have a big war chest.
Yep, absolutely. So one last thing I wanted to close out with you on. So you've been hopping back and forth between India and Dubai. Dubai is like it's like a rocket ship right now for startups, from what I hear. I had another guy from Dubai on the pod recently, and I just heard, actually, I was listening to All In Pod, and I think Jason Calacanis is in Dubai right now doing a launch fund event. What's that?
Dubai is an insane market. I was in Dubai like literally 12, 14 hours ago, right? I'll be back in a month, and then I'll be there for the next 6 months after.
Are you living there part-time?
7 to 8 months a year.
Okay.
So 7 to 8 months a year in Dubai, 2 months in India, and then 2 months traveling either in the UK or like basically in London or New York.
So so first, what's bringing you to Dubai? But then second, let's like go into that ecosystem there.
0% tax.
Oh, okay. So it's favorable to be there 7 months of the year.
Yeah, if you're not a venture-backed company and you're bootstrapped and you make cash flow and you make profit, and you want to pay yourself a reasonable salary because you make profits, and you don't want that salary to get taxed, you become you live in Dubai. Now it's harder to do as a US citizen. I'm not a US citizen, so it doesn't like impact me, because the US is one of the few countries in the world that taxes you based on citizenship, which means even if you go to Dubai, you're still getting taxed by the IRS. And I'm
Do you
sure
have to
there's
be a
you
UAE citizen or something, or how do you?
just don't have to be a US citizen.
Oh, okay.
You can be a citizen of any other, almost any other country in the world, because most other countries tax you based on whether you live there or not. So if you're from the UK or you're from India, you get your global income is taxed in India if you live in India for more than 180 days a year. If you don't live in India or the UK or in Germany or most of Europe for more than 180 days and you're like living there a couple months a year, you're only taxed on the income you make from that country. So like, for example, if you get a salary locally there, or like if you have like investments and they give you a dividend or something. But if you're an American citizen, you're taxed on global income, no matter where you live, because you're taxed not based on where you're a resident, but you're taxed based on the fact that you're American.
Did you move your C corp to UAE?
No, 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 no. So my C corp's still in the US, but my C corp my C corp can still pay me a salary, right? Or it can pay me like consulting fees because I'm still managing the business. And we're too small for it to matter at this point. But let's say you take a few $100,000 as a salary or as a consulting fee or something, which you would reasonably take if you were in the US as well. Here you get taxed at 0%. In the US, you'd get taxed on like whichever state you were in. Now,
Do you
if I
still
was
have to
in
pay corporate taxes in the US for having a
yes,
C
you
corp
do.
based there?
Yes. But you normally don't make as much profit in the US because we also have subsidiaries in other countries because half our revenue is in Europe. So we build that revenue in Europe itself, in Ireland directly.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, it
Yeah.
gets like I've heard of
Yeah, I'd recommend consulting a tax attorney before like doing any of this stuff.
yeah,
Uh,
I've heard of a lot of people that have companies set up like this. I have a few friends that do it, and it definitely gets like complicated. You have to understand,
yeah,
tax law in
you need to
multiple
make sure it's
places.
legal, right? Because the last thing you want to do is be shady with the IRS or any other authority. But like, there's ways to set it up where you can reduce the tax burden. So there's like you'll still pay some tax in some places because your company will make some profit that you pay in tax and so on, but you can still pay less.
Yeah, the place that everyone does it in the U.S. is Puerto Rico. So many people move to Puerto Rico because it's like 0% or like 1%, federal tax or something down there.
Yeah,
It's super low.
yeah. I don't know what it is like in Puerto Rico, but for most, I imagine for most U.S. citizens, it's a good bet.
Yeah, a lot of people move there. I mean, I've had this debate with so many people. Like I live in Philadelphia, so I've had a bunch of friends. Like some actually move there, some are considering moving there, and they're like, "Oh, this is how much money I can save on taxes." And then the debate is always like, "Yeah, but like, do you want to like? Is that for some people they might want to live in Puerto Rico? Awesome, like go live there. That's where you should be. But
Yeah,
if you're just moving there for the taxes." And you're not actually like
yeah.
if would you have a better quality of life in Philadelphia or New York or
Sure.
San Francisco and pay more in taxes or is like that's the debate.
So, so I believe you. Most people would live. Most people who are successful or reasonably successful would live a better quality of life in Dubai than almost anywhere else in the world.
What how why would you say?
The infrastructure is better. The roads in Dubai are better, simply far superior to the roads in the US.
Well, I live in
Cars,
Philly, man, so we have pretty shitty roads here.
but no matter where in the US you go, like I went to college in the Midwest in Indiana. I've been to New York. I've been to San Francisco. I've been to LA. You cannot compare, right? It's orders of magnitude better.
It's all new
Uh,
there. Everything's in the last couple decades.
Built in the last couple decades. The roads are new. The buildings are bigger, taller, better, cleaner, look more premium, look nicer. There's a lot of staff because of the way the country is set up. There's almost basically free movement of talent and labor. So like they have lots of people from India, from Bangladesh, from Philippines imported in to do all sorts of jobs, right? Like drive cars and drive buses and like the metro in Dubai, if I'm not wrong, is driverless. So
Oh wow.
you don't have to worry about a strike. It's a machine going or the trams driverless or both. You have to just check it. Uh, the malls are better and nicer. They're bigger. There's very less nature, right? Outside of like the marina and like the yachts and all the fun stuff. but like in terms of raw quality of life, if you're reasonably successful in a Western market, uh, you can have a higher quality of life for the same amount of money in Dubai. Like you could have like a chef and like everything else that you want.
Wow. And then the startup scenes, we started to talk about that. It's like apparently it's like cooking over there. I haven't been, but I'm curious
I
what you're
haven't.
seeing.
I've personally not been involved in the startup scene per se in Dubai or in India to that because we've built this company bootstrapped and remote, and we've not necessarily gone to the as many mixers and events. We haven't tried to participate in the community in that sense in India or in Dubai, to be honest.
But I mean, I was just in San Francisco a few weeks. Like you don't have to try to participate in the scene. Like just being there, you can just feel like the energy. You go out to a restaurant, like, the table next to you is talking about something that they're about to launch. Like you feel like the energy that's happening
Yeah,
there.
so in Dubai, people are always hustling because everyone's there to hustle, to be honest. Because more than I believe in the UAE as a whole, it's like 85%, but in Dubai specifically, which is an emirate or a state within the UAE, it's like 90 plus percent of people are expats, which means you're there on a work permit. So you're there to work. So 90% of the people there are there to like either start a business, run a business, do a job, so on and so forth, and to make money basically. So everyone's always hustling. So no matter where you go, people are doing businesses, but it's not necessarily tech businesses. So there's a great tech business scene there, and there's tech startups. But for example, the real estate and hospitality scene there is a lot bigger because there's a lot more money in Dubai in luxury goods,
Yeah,
yachts.
hotels and yachts and helicopters and all that
That
stuff.
that sort of so that economy is a lot larger because everyone from all over the world's coming there to like sort of experience luxury, right?
From
Quote
what I
unquote.
understand, though, it's like the market is kind of being fueled by this capital allocation from the oil families. So the families that historically have been investing in oil
Yeah, but
refining and
like so the UAE doesn't have something called oil families in that sense because the UAE is led by seven families that run the seven states. So they're essentially monarchs, absolute monarchs, and there's and again, right? I'm no expert on this, but like there's basically a council of seven monarchs from one representative of each family that runs the country essentially and decide laws. And one of the Emirates, which is Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the UAE, they own, I think, they control something like 8 to 10% of the world's oil reserves. And so that money has basically funded a lot of this infrastructure because they've been very forward looking slash forward thinking in the sense that they know the oil's not going to last forever. So they've used all the oil money and they continue to use all the oil money to build this world class infrastructure, services, hospitality, hotels, jets, yachts, so on and so forth. Right. And now people go like, for example, Dubai specifically, I think the number I was reading was it's a low single digit percent of GDP in Dubai that's oil or energy or any kind of commodity. It's almost all tourism and services and financial services because like they're
interesting. Okay.
also a big port for because they're tax free port, right? So a lot of goods and services. There's a lot of services inside on the mainland, but like there's a lot of goods that travel through the ports because they've built world class infrastructure for that as well, for ships and containers and so on and so forth. So Dubai specifically, no oil money. It's just like now it's just pure commercial hub. Uh, Abu Dhabi is still a lot of oil, a lot of energy. And I think the country as a whole is like something like 50% of the GDP is oil and 50% is of the United Arab Emirates as a whole is oil versus everything else. And it's every year it like inches more towards non-oil. So that I'm guessing their hope is like by 2040 or 50, when oil is less relevant, they've completely like removed the dependency on oil.
They have some reports out. I've read some reports about this like multi-decade plan to sort of diversify the income streams and the
Yeah,
GDP.
I think the UAE is completely sorted on it. It's probably Saudi Arabia that's going to have like have more effort to do that because
Yeah.
their oil is a much larger percentage of their GDP in a sense.
And
Uh,
UAE, I think, is like probably an easier place for this like kind of diversification to happen, probably because my understanding is they're more of like a westernized culture, I guess, or
More westernized, more tolerant, religiously, more flexible, tolerant, understanding, whatever word you want to use. So I'd say the UAE is probably the most forward-looking country in that part of the world, in the Middle East, and they've embraced whatever they think they need to do to succeed, and they've been doing it pretty well.
Awesome. Well, Sean, this was a great time having you on, man. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Cash flow? Did you clear your cash flow?